Hey, welcome to the October edition of the Agile Austin Product and AI SIG. I'm your host, Matt Roberts, here, one of the co-leads of the Agile Austin Product and AI SIG. Before we say hello to Tom, I'll just share just a little bit about our SIG. So hopefully this is what you're here for today. And even if you're not, please feel free to stay and learn and listen with us to Tom Evans as he talks about the jobs to be done meets AI. Great model, jobs to be done, meeting with AI, which is super useful in building products that solve real problems, which is exciting. Thank you, Tom, for being here today. This is the Agile Austin Product and AI SIG. We are part of Agile Austin. Here's part of our mission, even though it says Austin. There are people from all over the country, if not the United States, if not the world here today. We are fortunate to have two of our board members today. So if you want to contribute, help out, be volunteers, so on and so forth, both Sid Markle, our president, and Ben Rogers, our tech person, as part of Agile Austin. I should use CEO and CTO. So glad to have you both here. There are sponsorship opportunities for many, many years going on, couple of decades now. There's lots of ways to contribute through both sponsorship and membership, which is $35 a year. It's a great membership. Really just I've been a member for since maybe 2007. I don't live in Austin anymore. It's just great to support this community and be part of it. Speaking of that community, we've got six regularly scheduled SIGs right now, special interest groups. You're at the Product and AI, the lower left. There's several others. Ben Rogers, who is our CTO, also runs the Lean Kanban SIG. Is that right, Ben? Okay, just want to make sure. I'm throwing it out there.
Uh, yeah, Agile at scale. Yeah, lean
Oh, I'm
common.
sorry, Agile at Scale. I really good.
Yeah, Satish and Jim Brisson. Lean
That's
common.
right. That's right. Sorry, I was like, is that actually right? If you're interested in Agile at Scale, Ben is here to answer questions. We've got some great sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, Agile Velocity. I mean, another I don't know, decade and a half of sponsorship. ResumeX, I think, is new this year, which is great, or in the past 12 months. And our silver sponsor, Admiral Coaching. Thank you. The reason that all of this content is free is the fact that we have these great sponsors. As a member, there are professional development opportunities where you can apply for a professional development scholarship. If you're interested, please reach out to Sid, me, Ben, some other people. We've got all the details. There's also Agile Velocity has a 15% off public workshops. Great group to learn from over there. Interested in volunteering? Well, that's who we all are. We all volunteer. So there's contact at Agile Austin. Please feel free to send an email and somebody will reach out to you, or again, reach out to any of us that are here. A little bit about this SIG. You can read what our mission is, and you can see the two co-hosts. I'm Matt Roberts, Agile Austin since 2007, believe it or not. And Vishal is not here today, but he's my co-host. Upcoming events. Excuse me, Elena. Leonova is going to talk about the brutal truth behind AI product success. So following on the heels of Tom's presentation today, then here's how to be successful. And then Elena's going to talk about the brutal truth. So it's going to be a lot of fun there. We're off typically in December. So we are going to do that again this year. January 30th is our next meeting after this one. And really, it could be anybody here. Like what all the folks that present are practitioners. They're people that are part of our community. We love having folks that are facing challenges and problems. How can you learn? How can you fail? All that good stuff. Tom's presentation today is going to be really interesting. There is so much AI hype, and so how do you focus on that real valuable product stuff? And we have these models like jobs to be done that have been useful for a long time. So how do you I like what he said, like how do you ignore the parts that aren't useful, lean into the ones that are, and stay grounded while everyone else chases the noise. And let's see here. Thanks for coming. That is the that is the content that I'm going to share. I'll stop sharing here and I will give just a quick intro. One moment about Tom. And Tom, as you get your your content ready to go here. Let me just give you a quick intro. Tom, seasoned product leader, global go-to-market or GTM strategist, 20 plus years experience driving product success across all sorts of companies, Fortune 1000, high growth startups, international markets. Loves aligning product strategy with business outcomes, which I think a lot of us are really passionate about, and scaling high performing product organizations and sort of guiding companies also through transitions. We're all going through transitions. Agile is all about transitions. And, here we are yet again in the world of 2025, which everybody's going through a transition. So, Tom's an expert at sort of these product and go to market, and he's going to talk to us about jobs to be done. Tom, we are very grateful to have you here today, and
Well,
I'll hand it over to you.
yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces, some of you from the product camp community. And so, welcome to everyone. So, let's talk about the some of the challenges that we face with AI. And first of all, I'm just going to do some setup slides here. And so, if we look at technology, IT projects, digital initiatives in general, this is a recent statistic. 48% of digital initiatives enterprise wide meet or exceed their business outcomes, which means there is over 50% of them that don't. And that actually was somewhat of a surprising number because I expected it to be more around 30% or so. And I know if you look historically, a lot of initiatives have not met their outcomes over the years, but we definitely seem to be doing a bit better around those. Well, that's not just only initiatives within organizations, but it also applies to products. And one of the things that I find interesting is all of the technologies over the years that have been hyped as this is the next new thing. And so if you think about Gartner and their, what do they call it? Their hype cycle. These are just some of them that have been hyped over the last really about 25 years. And we look at it and go, well, what happened to them? And none of these really achieved the scale and expectations that everybody was expecting them, or that was being promised to us. And you notice there, I have one called intelligent agents. And I want to highlight that because I'm not talking about today's terminology of agentic AI. I'm talking about the early 1990s when we were talking about intelligent agents. And I remember having done a presentation in business school around intelligent agents. And I was just like, this is the next new thing. And I even, once I graduated, one of the partnering companies that I worked with had as part of their roadmap intelligent agents. Well, we know where that went, and it never really evolved into the expectations. And so, a lot of technologies here that we probably, some of these we've heard of, some maybe you haven't heard of, but they had a lot of hype behind them and never really achieved the expected outcome that was being promised and promoted by at least the analysts and maybe other pundits in the industry. Well, didn't they achieve that? Well, here's some of the reasons that they failed is really the technology wasn't ready or it wasn't mature. Often there's an underlying infrastructure that is required to help make those successful that wasn't there. And clearly, in some of those cases, it might have worked, but it really didn't deliver on the ROI that we expected it to. But I really want us to take us back to an even more fundamental challenge or a fundamental issue is that too often we find ourselves with a solution looking for a problem to solve. And we do that because we start off by focusing on the technology. I have seen so often coming from analysts and others things saying, here's where companies need to be focusing. And they're focusing, they talk about the technology. You need to focus on this technology. And the technology is important because we need to have those. But what we really want to do is to make sure that we are focusing on the problem that needs to be solved. The technology is just a tool to help us, solve these problems and allow us to create greater outcomes than what we have been looking for, or what the greater outcomes than what we currently are able to achieve. So let's go ahead and take a look at how does this apply to AI? And as a consultant, as a trainer in product management, here's one of the statements that I've heard from some of my clients multiple times. It's their CEO saying, you need to put AI in your products. And it leaves them going like, what do I do with that? And it's not just about putting AI into the product, as we're going to see, but understanding why we want to put AI into the product. Now, just to build on top of the AI hype, these are recent statistics that have been published by IDC and MIT, and many of you might have seen that. Almost 90% of AI initiatives don't scale. 90% of AI projects fail to deliver on their promises. And so part of that goes back to some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier in terms of the technology really being ready to solve the problems. One of the reports that I read is one of the foundational challenges with organizations implementing AI is they don't have the data in place to really leverage AI appropriately. And so that's definitely an issue. But I do also believe that often we don't go in with the clear understanding of what problem do we want to solve with AI. And it's more of a shotgun type approach versus a strategic set of choices based upon the needs of the organization, or for those of us delivering products into the market, based upon the needs of our customer. And so let's use this as a bridge in talking about jobs to be done. Some of you may already be familiar with this, um, but I want to build up the concepts of jobs to be done and help create some understanding, because what I find is even though jobs to be done is often spoken about, there's still some ways that it's spoken about improperly. And so I want to make sure we all have a clear understanding of that. Well, if we think about what our customers often ask for, or our internal stakeholders, you might reflect back on this quote from Henry Ford. And so here's the challenge is we shouldn't be asking what people want, especially in terms of a solution. What we really want to be asking them is what is it that they need to do? And so that's the focus of jobs to be done, is not talking about what is it they want in terms of a solution, but really getting back into what is it that they need to be able to do. And so that's the jobs to be done. And so this is a great framework for helping us make sure that we understand the underlying goals or outcomes of our target customers. And by doing that, and the better that we really understand the jobs to be done, we start to open ourselves up to a new world of possibilities in terms of how are we going to help solve that problem. And so that's really the key point that we want to do is if we think about the job, then it starts to open us up to innovation and new ways of being able to solve that problem. So let me tell a story here. And it's possible some of you might have heard this story in the past, but as a trainer and consultant, in the past, I traveled a fair amount. I still travel, but not quite as much as I used to. And one of the challenges that I would have is I'd arrive at the hotel, and even though I packed my clothes very carefully, especially my shirts, I would pull them out of the suitcase and they would be wrinkled. Well, the good news is every hotel that I've stayed in over the years has an iron and an ironing board to be able to iron my clothes. But here's the frustration that I was facing is yes, they had the iron and the ironing board, but I was always challenged at where do I set up the iron and the ironing board in the room? Because the electrical outlets were not in convenient locations where you had lots of room to set up the iron and the ironing board. And yes, it could be in the bathroom potentially, but I didn't want to go and iron clothes in the bathroom. I wanted to do it out there in the main part of the room where I could turn on the TV, watch a movie, or maybe watch some sports that are going on, and entertain myself. Because really, ironing shirts in a hotel room is kind of boring to do. And so that was the frustration I kept having. And so I kept telling this story in some of my training classes. And the point that I was making at that time is, if the hotels would actually come in and observe the challenges that we were facing, that they would go and solve it. And I would say, if they would just put an electrical outlet in this big open area of the wall, I could be able to set that up. And I finally had somebody in the class challenge me and say, Tom, aren't you starting with pointing out the solution and not the problem? And I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. And so we stepped back a little bit and we talked about, well, what is the problem? And, it could be that ironing clothes is boring. I had other things that I wanted to be able to do. It was taking up time that I didn't necessarily want to do in terms of ironing. And so at that point, that at least, and I had challenges in finding the right location to be able to place the iron and the ironing board. And so that at least started to bring about the problem space. But it was later on in another class where somebody asked me the question. They said, Tom, what is the job that you're trying to do? And here's where I finally realized that I had been talking wrong about the job, because they introduced me to Downy Wrinkle Releaser. And if you're not familiar with it, it is a spray that you spray on the clothes and give it a few tugs. And within about 10 minutes or so, you'll start to see the wrinkles disappear. And I will tell you, ever since I have discovered Downy Wrinkle Releaser, I carry it with me when I travel, and it is how I go and take the wrinkles out of my clothes. So I don't use on occasion, I may be stuck having to do some ironing, but in most cases, I'm using the Downy Wrinkle Releaser. Just recently, back in September, I was on the road for, I think, 13 days traveling in a couple different countries. And I had a big bottle of Downy Wrinkle Releaser that I used whenever I needed to spray on my shirts and be able to make them look presentable. So that brings us back into, what was my job to be done? I think traditionally, I was probably thinking about it in terms of iron shirts. But that isn't the job that I was trying to do. The job, which I kind of stated here, was remove wrinkles from shirt. And so here's the challenge: is, if we think about the jobs in the context of the solution, we're going to miss an opportunity for innovation or finding new ways of addressing that. And that's why I love the jobs to be framework, is that if we actually use it correctly and explore the possibilities in terms of what the job to be done, maybe even raise it to another level of abstraction, that opens us up to a world of possibilities in terms of how we innovate and actually solve the problem. Now, you may be familiar that when we talk about jobs to be done, there are three different types to be job. The one we focus on the most tends to be the functional job. And so having to do with what it is I'm actually trying to, the functional work that I am trying to accomplish. But in all cases, the person who's trying to do that job most likely has some social and emotional jobs that they want to be able to accomplish. And so when we are doing our discovery work, we want to make sure not only do we understand the functional job, but that we also explore the social and emotional. Yes, people buy products to solve functional problems, But there's also a lot that goes behind that in terms of the social and emotional. As you move into consumer oriented products, those often have even a bigger social and emotional component associated to them. So if we think about the story that I was telling, the functional job, of course, was to remove wrinkles from my shirt. But there was also a social component. And that social component was to appear professional for my clients or appear professional to my clients. And then from an emotional perspective, having shirts that look good helped me feel more confident in terms of my appearance. So you can see that not only was it the functional job, which was kind of the primary underlying issue, but there was also the social and emotional aspects associated with that job. So let me start relating all of this together because we hear about personas and jobs to be done and outcomes and problems and pains and gains and all of that. And I often think that we end up, there's a word that I want to use, but conflating them. We start bringing them together and treating them all as the same thing. But I want to separate them out because once we separate those out, we do start to get a better understanding of how do we apply the jobs to be done concept. And so everything starts with a persona. There's always going to be a persona, a job to be done, or individuals. There's always a persona in there that has a job to be done that supports that. And so make sure we understand who that persona is and what is the job that they are trying to do. And every time we are working on a job to be done, there is a desired outcome that we want to be able to achieve. But here's what happens is barriers get in the way. And those are the things that keep us from being able to achieve that outcome. We often frame those barriers as problems. And so problems lead to failure. I'm going to use the word failure, might be a little strong, but at least not achieving the desired outcome. And when we don't achieve that desired outcome, that's what creates a pain for us. So that failure to achieve the desired outcome creates pain for us. So when we start looking at this, each job to be done potentially, and I shouldn't say potentially, really always will have multiple desired outcomes. And so we want to try as much as possible to separate the job, which is very much goal oriented, from the outcome, which is how we measure the success of completing that job. So, how do we express outcomes? Well, the way that we can express outcomes is to talk about it in terms of increasing or decreasing or maybe minimizing a metric. And so, really, if we look at any outcome that we are trying to achieve, we are either trying to improve upon that outcome. We're always trying to improve upon that outcome, but the way that we're measuring that can be around either an increase or a decrease in terms of what that specific metric looks like. So let's do some examples here. Let's look back at the wrinkled shirt story. And so if the job is remove wrinkles from clothes, then uh, we could talk about the outcome being decrease the time to remove wrinkles, decrease the time to prepare to remove wrinkles, or decrease the time to set up to remove wrinkles, decrease the likelihood of creating new wrinkles, decrease the likelihood of causing damage to the clothes. And if we spent time on it, I could probably go through and identify another 5 or 10 potential outcomes. So this is that relationship that I want us to understand around the job to be done and the desired outcome. And all of us have the outcomes that we want to achieve, when we are executing on a job. So any persona, whether it's internal to an organization or one of your external customers, will be able to talk about these outcomes. These are things that we want them to be able to express to us. And so let's look at another example. So here is here is a famous product, very successful product that we all know as the iPod. And my question is, what is the job to be done? Give you a moment here to type something in the chat window on what you think the job to be done is. How would you describe the job to be done? I see one response. Anybody else? Okay, experience music, listen to music, enjoy music anytime, anywhere. I want to play my MP3s on the go, entertainment while traveling or working, enable communications. Okay, so I'm going to bridge off that. And so I think at the fundamental, it is listen to music and not being bored. So that would, thank you, Tammy. That would be one of the emotional aspects of the job to be done. So I'm going to focus here primarily on the functional aspect of the job to be done. And fundamentally, it is listen to music. Now, I like to narrow this down just a little bit more. And this is exactly what Woody said is listen to music on the go. Okay. And so this is probably to me, the best definition of the job to be done is to listen to music on the go because it separates us out from other types of jobs that is listening to music. We could potentially say, listen to my preferred music on the go. And I stay away from that one because I feel like preferred music is really now getting into the outcome. And so I feel really comfortable that listen to music on the go is well targeted, but it's just broad enough that now we can start exploring what the different outcomes might be. So let's look at this. And this is an important point, is this example will demonstrate to us that there is that the job to be done, listen to music, any job to be done tends to be very stable over time. So don't think that the job changes over time. The desired outcomes change, but the job stays very stable over time. So let me give you some examples here around listen to music on the go. So if we look back in history and time, perhaps we may have been able to listen to music on the go because we had minstrels following along with us to be able to sing music to us as we were sing and play music to us. Now, is that true? I don't know. Monty Python and the Holy Grail says it was, but it makes a great example is that there was the job to be done years ago to be able to listen to music on the go. But if we think about some of the challenges that they faced and perhaps some of the desired outcomes, it might be decrease the cost of listening to music on the go because you can imagine it was very expensive for somebody to have a minstrel following them along, singing and playing music to them as they were on the go. But they were also somewhat limited to what the minstrel knew. And so increase the number of songs available, increase the time I can listen. So the minstrel tires out. Maybe I want to listen to, it longer than what the minstrel is willing to do that. Let's take a big jump forward in time now into the 1950s. And Westinghouse revolutionized the listen to music on the go by introducing the portable radio. So now you can much more readily, much more people were able to listen to music on the go. But here's the challenge. You were limited to, you could select the radio station you wanted to listen to, perhaps, but you were limited to what they were playing. So you weren't necessarily always listening to your desired music. You also had limitations because these were battery powered. The batteries were not nearly quite what we know today. And so you could quickly run out of battery and not be able to continue listening to it. There were places where you may not be able to listen, or you may not be able to listen to the radio station you were because you were out of range from the radio station. And of course, this was why it was portable. It is not, what do I want to say? It is not something that you want to carry around hours and hours after time. So we jump forward again into the late 1970s, and Sony revolutionized the listen to music on the go industry with the Walkman. So now I could go and listen to my music on the go that I wanted to, but that was limited in how many songs I could carry with me. I had a, if I wanted a flexibility, I had to carry a lot of music with me. Increase the time I listened. Of course, these had batteries too. And so while they lasted longer than what the Westinghouse radio did, over time, those would run out of battery also. All right. And I know that I'm skipping several evolutions in here, but I'm just hitting some of the key points. Then along came in, what was the late 1990s, the iPod. And all of a sudden, as Steve Jobs says, 1,000 songs in your pocket. So, yes, I was able to go and start addressing and improving upon many of the desired outcomes that you see there. But there were still some outcome. Maybe we were satisfied for a time being, but then we had new desires. We wanted to reduce the time to access the songs that I wanted to listen to. I wanted to increase the number of songs that are new to me that I like. Those just might be some potential options there. Well, even though the iPod was such a successful product, in 2022, Apple end of life that product. And so all of a sudden we have streaming music capabilities like Spotify. Spotify's not the only one. Is that our music nirvana where it meets all of our desired outcomes? I don't know, but for right now, I'm pretty satisfied with what I'm able to do in terms of listening to music on the go with Spotify. But I'm sure over time there are going to be some new desires and new outcomes that are created about listening to music on the go, and we will see some additional evolutions around that. But here's the point, is that the job didn't change. What changed was the technology as an enabler to do that job better, to improve the outcomes that we want to be able to achieve. And so that's why I love the jobs to be done framework, because if we take it and abstract it to the right level, it starts to bring us back away from the technology first, and then helps us start thinking about how can we leverage the technology to help us do that job better than what we have been able to do in the past. All right, so what does all of this have to do with AI? Well, when we use AI, we need to solve real problems, whether we are trying to leverage to address problems internally within our organization, or whether we are looking at our customers. We want to make sure that we have identified and are solving real problems, real needs for them. And so where do we start? We start with the jobs to be done. And then we work with them to identify what outcomes are you trying to achieve? What outcomes are you trying to improve upon as you are executing on that job to be done? And so if we start looking at AI use cases, you might categorize these differently, but you can really take the AI use cases and categorize them in just a few number of different ways. And it's often about automating work that is replacing the human in it or helping the human improve upon the work that they are doing in terms of a process oriented type of work. We're enhancing decision making, so helping people make better decisions, help them make decisions faster, help them gain additional insights. Or it's allowing us to create and innovate and able to find new ways to be able to accomplish jobs to be done. But you notice when we look at all of those, we want to make sure we're clear on what is the outcome that we are trying to improve upon. And that needs to guide the work that we want to do. So, what I want to get to here in summary is let's not use AI as a solution looking for a problem to solve. Let's move away from that. But let's make sure that we start with the jobs to be done. So let's identify the pains that our customers have. Those are typically our customers, whether internal or external. Let's identify the pains. Those are typically expressed as a symptom because the pain is really just a symptom, not necessarily the problem. As we explore those pains, let's understand what their unmet outcomes are. What are their desired outcomes that they are unable to achieve? And then we get into the real work of what's the problem? What's the root cause of them not being able to meet those outcomes? That's where we start to identify the barriers that are getting in the way. And then make sure we have a clear understanding of the job to be done as they are trying to achieve those outcomes. Because, like I said, if I get caught up too early and I haven't framed the job to be done correctly, I might focus on get focused on a specific technology to solve that problem. But if I take the moment to think about what the real job to be done is, that's going to open me up to that world of possibilities. That's going to move me away from how do I make ironing in a hotel faster to how do I go and spray clothes or whatever the other potential solutions might be. And it's then at that point we are now able to go and address actually develop the solution. And so whether you're working on whatever type of product, and especially if you're working on AI, make sure that you're working through this process and using it as a way to fix or use AI productively and effectively, either for your customers or for your organization. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. I guess we got some time here for some Q&A, so happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks for
Hey,
that,
Tom.
Tom. Oh, go ahead, Vishal.
Sorry. Hey, Tom, thank you so much. This was great, thought-provoking. Um, I did want to ask you, so there's a client of mine that basically was a big or is a huge fan of jobs to be done. Interestingly, though, they basically have been partnering with this company that essentially says, hey, here's how we use AI in the context of jobs to be done, where you literally, instead of talking to customers or consumers, you're asking AI the questions to say, in this context, what's the job to be done? And I'm like, really? But where's it getting the data from? I don't know if you've heard anything like that, but that just seems, I don't know,
Yeah,
convoluted.
I've actually experimented with that a little bit. And so I do know there are some companies that specifically have built their AI specifically to allow you to do voice of the customer type work.
Uh-huh.
And one of the companies that I talked to said that the results they're getting are about, I think it's in the 80% alignment with what you would actually hear from real customers. So, one is that surprised me. That was much better than what I would have expected. And so I tested a couple of voices of the customers, and here's the part that left me with a bit of caution is that everything that came out, or I would say most of the things that came out as I did voice of the customer with AI was what I would almost call the obvious things. And
Mm.
so I wasn't convinced at that point that AI was getting me to, a more depth, real deep understanding of what those key outcomes were and what the real problems and issues were. So I thought it was good, but
Mm.
it still gave me a pause to say, would I trust just AI? And so I think in terms of using AI, as a proxy for customers, one thing, and this is just good AI practices from the beginning. This isn't about voice of the customer, but it is good to set up some great context. And so when I did the voice of the customer using AI, I started off by making sure that I clearly defined a persona. And so worked through a specific persona that I had in mind, had it help me define it. And then I started going through some questionings with it. Now, so that context is really important. But the other thing is the chain of questioning. And so this is where with AI, partly because it was responding, at least initially, it was responding to me in text. It was hard to read and take the time to absorb it. And I was probably a little rushed at the time. If I had, I
Mm.
probably would have done a better job of framing my follow-up questions. But if you do use AI, then it makes sure that you take time to analyze what they said so that you can form really good follow-up questions that are going to help you get into the deeper level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of fun, I think I was using Chat GPT for this, where you could set it up in a voice session. And so I actually did a voice VOC with it. And then at the end, asked the Chat GPT to summarize the findings that came out of that. And
Mm.
it was interesting. And I would say if you're still trying to get some initial thoughts around the hypothesis of the job to be done and the desired outcomes and the problems that they're facing, I'd happily use AI, but I would use that more as this is a starting point to help me frame my discussions. But at this point, I don't think I would trust AI as my sole source of customer
Okay.
discovery.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. Yep.
One, a bit of a comment on that. If folks are familiar with Amazon's sort of well known for this PR FAQ, where you write the press release and the FAQ, which has all the frequently asked questions, and usually the press release is while it talks about the problem, it really talks about the solution, and the FAQ talks about sort of the problems. And I heard this recently, like AI is really good at the PR, but not so much with the FAQ portion of that document, because that's like where things are very, very hyper specific to
Mm-hmm.
the customer problems that are like going to be solved, and maybe even more importantly, like what's not going to be solved, right? Like it's like here's the remaining bit, because the FAQ, really the PR is sort of like this giveth and the FAQ sort of taketh away. So it's kind of like this. I thought it was an interesting characterization of where AI today can really help out, and maybe forever. The problem elaboration is, there's other things that you can use AI, I found, to help with that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's less about like the specifics of the
Right.
problem, because you just can't. Here's like you're essentially like that is the problem. You're asking AI to solve this problem, and it's like how do you ask the AI to solve the problem if you can't state the problem? Like it's just like it's sort of like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I find the newer generations of AI are much better, but when I initially used it for like a press release or something like that, the results that I got was what I would call marketing BS.
Mm,
It was stuff that just sounded good, but in the end, it didn't really say anything. I do find now when I use it for marketing, it does a better job of actually saying something worthwhile. But as in all things, right now, I treat it as helping me create a first draft
mhm,
and then taking it from that and refining it, whether it's around, writing a PRFAQ or doing an initial hypothesis around a market problem. Treat it as a draft.
mhm.
And as Sid says, it's an assumption that still needs to be validated.
I like that.
So I don't want to hog all the questions. If someone has another question, I'm happy to wait. Okay, so my question was, Agile is all about inspecting and adapting, and then you basically, one of the challenges with VOCs and jobs to be done even, right, is when you build a product that's going to apply to multiple different potential contexts, customers, personas, um, how do you then determine, I don't know, is there a good trick or way to kind of say, okay, 50 different customers said this, 25 said that, and so on and so forth, and then try to kind of, I know I'm going more into the VOC land of stuff, but at the end of the day, right? I mean, how do you decide what's the real job to be done?
Yeah. No, I think in terms of the job to be done, if you keep it at the right level, getting to the job to be done and coming up with at least a good definition of it is not the hardest part of it. I think it's really identifying and understanding the desired outcomes and which of those outcomes are most important to them and which of those outcomes are they most disappointed in terms of being able to achieve. That's where I think the harder work is. And to your point, Vishal, is that if I go and start looking across 50 different customers, they're going to each prioritize their outcomes differently. They're going to give me different expectations around how well they're achieving those outcomes or not. And if you do that, there's a really rigorous way, an analytical way to actually conduct this in both what I would call a qualitative way as far as in a quantitative way. But in the end, what that ends up doing is helping you create your market segmentation. Because when one part of your target market has, what do I want to say, they prioritize one set of outcomes over a different set that somebody else might prioritize, you start to realize there are actually two different market segments. And then as you start applying, analysis in a general way, which of those is feeling the most pain? Which of those have the highest growth opportunity? Those are things that I would look at then once I've done that detailed analysis.
And I don't know, thanks. And I don't know if there's anyone from a testing perspective that's on the call, but how do you then validate that you've actually achieved what the job to be done was? Is there some acceptance criteria you tend to define up front?
What I would go back to, I'd go back to the customer. And so, are you saying, how do you validate that you've properly identified the job to be done and the outcomes, or how do I make sure that the solution I
Right, the
develop,
solution. Sorry, I
yeah,
meant the
the solution.
solution.
This is where I would go through series of customer feedback on the solution. So I would start with and this is using agile principles right here. I would go and start with the least expensive way that I can go and demonstrate the product to them and get feedback on that and help me understand, am I helping solve that problem? So it goes back to identifying those uncertainties and doing some testing around those uncertainties, getting feedback on a proposed solution. Then you go back and you detail the product a little bit more, and then you get some additional feedback, and then you go and detail it out more. And so this could start off as a simple, what I want to say. Well, but today in the world of software with vibe coding, you can get some pretty, hefty type. You can get a pretty good. I'm going to call it demonstratable prototype. It's probably not really a prototype yet, but a demonstratable, something that you can walk through and get some feedback from. And then you can go and get that into the hands of your developer and build it out in a little bit more functional capability, get that feedback and continue to iterate on that. That's the approach that I would always take. And whether I am looking at a software product, and I know Vishal, you work with a lot of physical products.
Mhm.
I'd still take the same approach: is
Yep.
making sure I have iterations in there to get feedback.
Yep, that's literally the framework we have. No.
Yep.
Oh,
I know
but
you and I've talked, so we.
Michelle is, and so I guess I can speak a little bit to being one of those endangered species called quality assurance person. And so, yeah, to y'all's point, we don't really treat it a lot differently, but since people are now using AI at all points of the life cycle, be it generating the written word that defines what the acceptance criteria is, all the way to, as y'all were referring to, vibe coding. I think it's even more critical now, especially with the companies with the luxury and resources to still employ people like me, to truly validate things and assumptions that are being put into each step of the development life cycle. And so I'm not advocating for holding things up. Like what I'm advocating for is, if you have the luxury in your organization, to also use tools in the quality life cycle to automate as much of the rote work as possible, so that a human mind is thinking about things up front to make sure and validate the assumptions, and whatever poorly worded acceptance criteria comes up from an AI engine. I think it's even more critical to have a human in the loop now. I will say that companies also have, again, these are large companies, agile scaling, where I've worked in the past decade or so. If you have the luxury to embed analytics and things, that also makes things a ton easier, from A/B testing to tracking user behavior. You can pretty iteratively and rapidly not just prototype that solution up in the pipeline, but get it out there and potentially roll back. So we're really accelerating on the QA front in terms of automating solutions to validate things, so that we're still applying that critical thinking skill to what's being put down as the written word.
And Ben, I want to bridge on something you said, because we just some of my colleagues just had a discussion this morning about the right kind of analytics to have in AI products. And so you need to have analytics in there that are measuring the quality of the model and be able to track the quality of the model over time. If you're doing anything with agentic AI, to where one agent is handing off something to another agent to another, you need to make sure that connection and communication is solid. And so you need to have some tracking metrics in place to make sure what was initially delivered was actually received, and that it was used in the proper way. So there are some additional areas of focus now that AI is going to need to have one QA on, but also be able to have those tracking metrics in place.
Yeah, and effectively, we are all now software testers. We were before, because organizations were basically eliminating their QA departments and saying customers were the QA department. But yeah, that, I don't know that will go by the wayside necessarily, but I definitely foresee with AI, being used more and more, that more defects are going to cause enough pain that
Mhm.
eventually we will have, again, more humans in the loop for a period of time, until the robots replace all of us.
Let's hope that's a long ways off.
Any other
Let's not close today's conversation on that thought.
right? Any other any other folks that want to chime in here? Because we're almost out of time. I'm looking at other names: Marcella, Jean-Pierre, Lucy, Woody, Chris, Stacy. You all have any other questions to ask?
I had one last one, but like I said, I don't want to keep hogging the question bank. And these were not set up, so so Tom, quick thing. Is there a concept of a child jobs to be done story or something like that? Like what is there a hierarchy concept?
Yes, there can be. And so let me give you where I would see this most often occur is when I look at a business environment. And so if I look at a business operation, there is going to be a job to be done that the business is trying to accomplish. But if I stop there, I'm not going to get the whole level of insights. And so that's where I would start at a customer level, understanding the job to be done and the desired outcomes as best as I can. But then I'm going to say, who are the personas within the organization that are responsible for that overall job to be done? And I'm going to break that down into what is your job to be done that supports that overarching job to be done. What are your desired outcomes? Where are you running into problem? And that can go from, the buyer level, the executive decision maker level, all the way down to the person on the factory floor, or working in a call center or support center, whatever that level is. They all have a job to be done, and they all have desired outcomes. And so, yes, I'm starting with the parent job, but I'm going to break that down into a set of child jobs by looking at the personas.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, we are at time today. As Max Akizi like to say of the Agile Austin leader, say we start on time and we end on time. And this is a rare opportunity where we end on time here at the Agile Austin Product and AI SIG, because we usually don't. We just keep going. So like maybe
Well, that's generally because Max tends to be on the call. He doesn't.
between 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 Max Akizi and Matt Roberts, we do tend to go on. So great. By the way, Vishal joined us, so he's the other co-SIG lead of the product and AI SIG. Tom Evans, thank you so much for your contribution to the community today. For folks it was great to see folks. I'm seeing Lucy, Jean-Pierre, seeing folks on camera, Peter earlier in the time. So it's great to see people on the camera too. So it's great to have you. We are done for the year. Amazing. This is now wrapping up our second year as a SIG. And I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself.
November.
We got November. Oh my gosh. I was
Yeah.
far ahead of myself. See, we won't end on time because of me yet again. So we have one more next November. It's a little bit earlier, so we're avoiding the sort of right on Thanksgiving. So kind of like we avoided Halloween this month. We put it on not the last Friday, but the second to last Friday. We're doing the same thing next month for November, and we'll see you there. The meetup is already out there. And once again, Tom, thank you so much for your contribution today. We really appreciate you.
And Elena is an awesome speaker too, so highly
Okay.
recommend her. So,
Fantastic.
all righty, thank you so much. Great to
Thanks,
see
Matt.
everyone.
Nice job, Tom.
All righty,
you.
thank you.
Good job.
Bye.
Stop the recording.